Hello and welcome to the Talking Tradesman podcast. I am joined this evening by John Graham of JGDecorator up in York, I believe.
That's correct.
Is that right? That's correct. Right, John, let's talk, my mate. I believe, because we're recording this in the depth of January, if your Instagram tells a story, it's snowing up there, isn't it?
It has been, yeah. It was, we've had flurries of it kind of here, there, and everywhere. North Yorkshire it's a huge rural area, and where I live in particular is basically in the middle of nowhere. It's a 25-mile journey to York. It's around about a 28-mile journey to Scarborough. So we're kind of like in the middle of nowhere, and it because of the geography of being like the Vale of York and the Vale of Pickering, they were, ancient lakes at some point in the distant past, is that geographically you have these like microclimates. So it can be snowing literally like a couple of miles down the road from you, and it will be snowing or raining all day, but you have a completely different experience. And the experience today has been a very interesting drive to work in the snow.
Yeah, I bet, mate. I bet. So, for anyone listening, I've been aware of John and JGDecorator for a while via Instagram because we're both in the same trade. So, as you can guess, John's a decorator. So yeah, we're in the same trade, mate. As I like to do with these things, because I believe, this podcast is about getting to know the person behind the business. We're bound to touch on business because it's just one of those things, but this is about getting to know the person behind the business, your story, your journey. And as with any story, it has a beginning. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about you then, John.
So in relation to the trade itself, I'll just start there, is I set out on this journey the day after finishing my GCSEs at secondary school. I went through my apprenticeship at Hull College, really enjoyed the experience. Like looking back now, at the time I was a 17, 18, 19-year-old lad. I had my ups and downs with it. Came out of that, did my MVQ level 3. Went self-employed, but didn't do decorating full time. Mixed it up with some window cleaning at the time. Then when I got married in 2002, it was my wife who kind of really gave me the confidence to choose one or the other. At the time, I probably earned more money being a window cleaner than I did decorating. But I didn't get the enjoyment out of painting that I did do with window cleaning. So around about 2003, 2004, I undertook doing it full time and being a professional painter and decorator. At the time, charging £50 a day.
Yeah.
And kind of doing it that way and working my way through the experiences of what it's like to be self-employed. I've had opportunity to teach the trade at York College for a period of time. And I do a lot of social media work and stuff like that because I'm really passionate about this job. I'm a paint nerd, and I'm not like I'm not embarrassed about that or anything. But I come with it with that kind of educational side from it, from my teaching, and I really enjoy speaking to other decorators, other tradespeople, other apprentices about this trade that I'm really passionate about, and doing my boring videos like every day and stuff like that, just chronicling my day-to-day life as a painter, and the ups and downs that come with that as well. So that's my journey with being a painter and decorator. And you can find me, JGDecorator, on Instagram. I'll get the plug in now.
Got that one in there quickly, John. I think I lost you for a moment there.
Yeah. Back. There we go.
Yeah, you got that one in there quickly.
Yeah.
I must admit, though, mate, I do. No, no, not at all, not at all. I'm more than happy, mate. Promote your business all the way through. So yeah, you can find John at JGDecorator on Instagram, and he does do some cracking videos. You're on there. Fair play to you,
Boring,
mate, because you're on there
boring,
consistently.
boring videos.
No, not
But
at all.
say cracking, they're
A lot
boring. We're
of
talking about paint drying.
no, a lot of what you do though, mate, and what I like is a lot of your stuff is angled at the education. So
Mm,
to me, that's paying it forwards and helping other people.
yeah.
And not everybody is prepared to do that, you know. And I know I've seen that you've got like a separate page that you angle at apprentices in the trade.
Mm,
So again, it's paying it forwards into the trade, isn't it, and offering
yeah.
your knowledge for free, essentially.
Yeah,
So no, fair
absolutely.
play for doing those, mate. But like I said, the other thing is you are pretty ever present. You're consistently present on there with your stories. So anyone listening, really, anyone watching your stories, there's a lot to pick up, a lot to learn, and it's all free.
And one of the principal reasons why I do my videos is that, and this kind of goes into the mental health aspect of it, is that
Mm,
working by yourself on your own can be boring and it can be incredibly lonely as well.
yeah,
When you are sanding something down or you're literally watching paint dry so that you can get another coat on, you're just by yourself with your own thoughts, your own kind of mental and emotional bubble. And I find the things that I do help me in a way to just speak to other people, because
yeah,
otherwise I would be either speaking to the client or speaking to the family, and that's all who I would be speaking to. So I find the
yeah.
mental health side of it appeals to the way that I'm conscious of my own mental health and well-being, and factoring in processes and strategies to cope with the lonely aspects of working on your own.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, mate. There is, and this is a recurrent theme because one of the things, and we'll jump straight into the deep end here. One of the things I've asked every guest on the podcast so far is why they think that the the rates of people taking their own lives are such an issue in the building trades, and the mental health issue is by far superior, and it overshadows any other industry. Why would you say that the building trades are so adversely affected in comparison to other trades?
So again, I come from this from partly an educational point of view. I'm also, outside of being a painter and decorator, I'm a foster carer as well. So I'm
Mm,
aware of some of the mental health situations that present themselves, particularly in children who are suffering from trauma, childhood trauma in
mm,
particular. Um,
yeah,
and seeing how that presents itself not only in a child, but also how that might present itself in an adult as well. So what I find is that it's trauma at some point, which we all have as human beings, as conscious agents. We all have traumatic experiences in our lives to a greater or
mm,
lesser degree. And it's how we manage that, how we resolve those issues, and how we come to terms that there are maybe certain things that we're never going to get closure with, we're never going to um, have concluded to our benefit. Um, but then it's ways in which we manage that. So in the building industry in particular, I think it's a combination of um, being part of an institution and an attitude within a trade where men of a certain generation, I'm not going to say all men, don't feel as if they can talk about their issues, or they've got to be drunk to talk about their issues. They can't do it in a sober way, in a meaningful way,
mm,
because that is viewed as being, well, and I don't mean this in a homophobic way, but are you being a bit gay? Are you being a bit weak? Are you being a bit camp? Or we don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about issues. We're strong men. We keep it all together. And it's a generational thing, and it's an institutional thing. Why I feel some, not all men, find themselves in a position within the construction industry where suicide is the most rational thing to do in their minds.
Yeah.
Which, you could argue is not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question that I'm asking everyone mainly because there doesn't seem to be an answer. And I would hope that if there was a clear answer, then there'd be some kind of action being taken. So it's just interesting to get everybody's different perspective on it. I mean, one of the things that you said there was about the time spent alone and the solitude of it, and that you use social media almost as a remedy to that. And I must say, to be honest, within our trade, within the painting and decorating industry, there is this like online community of people that interact, and I think that does come from a lot of people working solo. And I think I probably, up until you mentioned it, then I'm now sat here thinking about it, and that definitely alleviates some of that feeling of solitude and the lonely element of the trade. So I think that's a huge positive, really. But yeah, it
I
is.
find. Go
No,
ahead.
go on.
No, I do think that some people struggle with that notion of that it's you're doing this because you enjoy interacting with other people. You're not. There's no ulterior motive for networking with other people. I've had it from family. My own wife, you spend too much time on Instagram and too long doing your stories and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
my kind of reply to that is, it takes me the time to make a cup of coffee to do my stories for the day, and it helps me from staving off the feelings of loneliness, of being alone. And I'll carry on doing that. And if other people have an issue with that, then that's their problem. It's not my problem. And that's where kind of my own personal resilience and my own personal trauma has played a part in me just having to shield off that type of criticism.
I mean, it's interesting, mate. I mean, I'll pull back. The other thing that you mentioned there was that you do foster caring, and you have to consider things like childhood trauma. I mean, first of all, mate, it's an amazing thing to do. Do you do long term or short term, or is it a mix, or how does that work?
So we do the whole range. So currently we have a girl, teenager, who's staying with us, has been with us for 3 months, and will potentially stay with us for a lot longer. We had a boy who was 13 stay with us for a week. He went back last Sunday. We've had a little girl be with us since she was 10 months old, and she will be with us like long term until she's 18. So,
Oh wow, that's incredible, mate.
yeah, so I've got a daughter, my own daughter. I've got three children, three biological children, I should say. My daughter Jasmine is 20. My fraternal twins, my son and my daughter, have just turned 17, and my littlest one, Willow, will be 4 the end of May. So I'm parenting all over again.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you've had your biological children, they're getting to the stage where they're a lot more independent. I mean, my son
Yeah.
turns 17 in April, so I know that age. And then you've gone right the way back, right the way back
I,
to having a little
I'm
one.
not. Yeah, I'm not kidding when I say this. Is that 2 weeks ago I was doing driving lessons with Joshua and Mia, and we're trying to potty train our youngest at the moment. So I was cleaning out soiled knickers in the afternoon. So I've got various
Wow.
different hats that I've got to wear as
Yeah.
being a parent.
Fair play to you, mate. I mean, as I say, there's a lot of nobility, and with the fostering as well, because I'm sure a lot of the children that come to you have come from quite a troubled and traumatic background to be in that position. So how do you cope with that?
So I suppose it might be advantageous to answer that by talking about my own childhood, if
Of course.
that's um. So
Yeah,
here's a
mate.
can of
Let's go back.
worms. Let's just pop
Yeah,
the lid off that and let's see
let's
what
rip it
comes
off,
out.
mate. Let's rip it off and see what happens.
So I was raised extremely religious from the ages of
Mm.
being born to my early 30s. I
Oh
was
wow. Okay.
a fundamentalist Christian. Evolution was not right. Um, I had particular viewpoints about gay men and women, trans men and women, uh, even biologically, female women as well. That
Mm.
their place was secondary to me being a man. I was raised with the idea, the very real, tangible idea that the end of the world was coming any day now. I can remember my dad saying to me that he couldn't imagine me leaving primary school. This was when I lived in Manchester. I'm a Manchester lad. He couldn't imagine me leaving primary school and the world still being here. So from being a child, I was raised with the idea that all of my school friends, all of my teachers, anyone who wasn't part of this group were destined for imminent death and destruction at any moment. It could happen. And as a child, you raise with that, and you raise with believing that that is true. And that because you're a good person, because you're a good member of this religious community, this cult, this high control, high demand group, that if you play your part, if you do the right things, you'll be able to get through this, the end of the world, and you'll be in paradise at the end of it. And
Wow.
so, I don't know if you've got want to ask me any bits about that so far.
Um, I guess how was it as a child to be initially raised with that like impending sense of doom hanging over you, where you thought that, because the thing is, when you're a child, and I think there's a part of evolution really that installs in us that you kind of just believe what your parents say. I think
Mm,
when we're growing up, it's a safety mechanism, because when
yeah,
you're a kid and your parent says, if you walk off that cliff, you'll die. I mean,
yeah,
technically, as a child, you don't know. So you take it as, well, forgive the expression, but gospel.
yeah.
Um, so if you're told as a child that that is going to be the case, I imagine that you would believe that 100%.
Well,
Um,
it becomes your constructed reality outside of objective reality. That becomes your way of seeing the world. There are many writers who have talked about the God glasses, these spectacles that you put on that filter objective reality through these spectacles, and you compose this reality by which it's us and them. It's a kind of fake reality, but you don't know any different because you're a child. Um,
yeah.
you got drum
So,
music on in the background.
mate, do you know what? For anyone who can actually hear this, I mean, the software's good at taking things out, so I'm praying it can. But this is the first time I've ever known this. It would appear there's a band practicing in the building. So this is the first I've ever known of this. But yeah, because I've got noise cancelling headphones in, I was like, why can I hear that? But yeah, there's a band playing.
Nice.
So is that really loud for you, John?
No, it's not bad. It's just
No.
I could see you taking your headphone out to hear it.
Yeah. Let's hope they're any good, mate. It might play a nice like backing track. I'm
Yeah,
not sure
backing
what kind
track.
of music they're playing,
Yeah,
but there we go. We'll crack up, mate. This is adds to the reality of things, doesn't it? So I'm sorry for the
but
interruption, mate.
no,
But
no, it's
yeah,
but
so jumping back into it, like how was that to have that impending sense of doom? I guess like at such a young age. Like, how
you
did you deal with that?
you didn't really think about it. You didn't think of the reality of a situation like that because the way that the group um, developed the message was that you're okay, you're safe because you're one of the chosen few. And as a child, you
Right.
grew comfort from that and solace that everyone else, everyone else, the bad people might die, but I'm going to be okay. But then as you get older, you start to think, well, you know what? I can't celebrate a birthday because I'm part of this group and they don't celebrate birthdays. I can't do Christmas because the group says I can't celebrate Christmas. I mean,
Okay.
I'm 42, and last last year was the second time I've celebrated my birthday.
No way. So,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, that's took me by surprise a little because when you said fundamentalist Christian, I just
Mm.
assumed that they would celebrate probably even with more vigor all of the traditional Christian things, but that sounds like that wasn't the case.
Yeah, that's correct. What they tried to do is make themselves like distinct and unique from quote unquote false Christianity here, that not all Christians are good
Okay.
people. So, out of Christendom and Christianity, there is like false Christians, but there are the true Christians. And don't you know, because I happened to be born into a family that was part of this group, I happen to be a true Christian. Don't you know?
That
It
was
was an
lucky.
accident. It
Yeah.
was an accident of birth.
And
Um,
so, were your whole when you say your family, how much of your family were part of that religion?
so all of my immediate family, so my dad and my mum, and myself and my brother. My parents
Hmm.
separated when I was 7.5, separated and divorced because of the way that the group functions. And this is the high demand and, in particular, high control aspect of the group. Was that because my mum not only left my dad but left the religion as well, I had to cease all contact with my mother. So
Oh, wow.
for almost I had a bit of contact with my mum for a couple of years after that, but basically for like 15, 20 years, I didn't know whether my mum was alive or dead because of the way that the group structured its control of the adherents. Anyone who left, you just
Yeah.
treat them as they are literally dead, not
Wow.
figuratively. They are literally dead to you, and if you speak to them, you potentially could be removed from the group as well. And you don't want to leave the group because the end of the world's coming. So don't you want to stay with us? Don't you want to stay and go into paradise? And again, I'm a child. I'm a child listening to this.
Incredible.
I can't
Yeah.
speak to my own mum because I don't want to die because the end of the world's coming tomorrow.
Wow. And what age were you when your mum left?
So my parents divorced when I was 7.5. Kept in contact with my mum for uh, until I was maybe 9, 10. But then, yeah, then lost all contact with my mum.
for a period of 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years.
Wow.
And then
So
yeah, go ahead.
so sorry, John. So in that time, you were solely raised by your father.
For a period of years, and then my dad remarried, and we moved from Manchester to Hull, where my dad and my stepmom and my full brother and my half brother still reside. Um, both, yeah. So we move kind of over to there.
And so you were immersed in that lifestyle all the way through till when you were 30.
Yeah, pretty much so. So once we moved to Hull, I kind of lost contact with a lot of my friends who, school friends, but also friends of my own age who were part of the community, the religious community, um, because just distance, and it was like the 90s. You didn't have social media, kids, in the
Yeah,
90s
yeah,
when I
yeah,
was. It was a different world.
yeah. Wasn't it just?
And then my 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 dad remarried my stepmom, um, and the issue with that relationship was that there was a lot of domestic abuse, a
Mm.
lot of like abuse, physical abuse, meted out to me. Um, I,
From your
I
father or from the stepmother?
from my father, um, but the domestic abuse was between the two of them, and it got quite progressively more and more violent as well. And I'm privy to all of that as being
You were witness to it.
13, 14 of it. Um, and so you see instances of like domestic abuse, you know, parents being thrown downstairs and shouting and screaming. And then the very next day, they're at church, singing, reading the Bible, as if nothing had happened. And so there's that dichotomy starting to raise itself, this
Yeah.
hypocrisy. And at the time I'm a child, I'm not aware of these concepts as I do now. Um, but you knew instinctively that something was wrong. Something was wrong in their relationship. Oh, hang on a minute, there's another couple in this group. Their relationship isn't good. And so um, you start to see these things happen, but then you start to be cognizant of the trauma that's affected you, how that's presenting itself as well in my conduct, the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm feeling, and the way that I try to justify to myself, well, my dad, you know, my parent hits me because he loves me, you know? Um, I
Was that
don't want
how it
to,
was actually? Was that framed to you that way, or was
yeah,
that your own deduct? That
yeah,
was.
because the teachings was that the God of the Bible. And before I go any further, I recognise that there are many people of faith and people who have, I like to call it an experience with God that's personal to them. And whatever I say, I don't want to sound as if I'm taken away from their experience. That's, in my mind, that's sacrosanct. And I would never want to say or do anything that feels as if I'm quote unquote, attacking them in any way. This is just my lived experience. Is that in particular the way that I was raised, the God of the Bible is a jealous God, is a vengeful God. He disciplines harshly, but he does it out of love. So when you got hit by your parent, you're being hit because the Bible clearly states, spare the rod spoil the child. So you had scriptural backing for corporal punishment and physical discipline. So you had this this mashup of emotions that I'm being hit and feeling pain, but they're telling me that I'm loved and they're doing it out of love. So this churns around these feelings of love and hate and embarrassment. And, you're a teenager as well. So you're dealing with like hormonal things, and your body's changing, your mind's changing, your emotions are in flux. And so it's churning around. And it came to the point where, like at 16, I'd tried to commit suicide myself because it was too much for me. All of these different emotions that were in conflict in my heart and in my mind.
Sorry to hear that you went through that, mate. I mean, at that point, when you say you tried to take your own life, was your father aware of that at the time? And how did that reflect on the position you were in, like with the religious group? How was that? Did anyone know?
No, no one knew. No one knew. And in a way, this might sound strange, but in a way, I'm thankful that no one within the group did know about it, because I'm still part of the X like community, who used to be part of the group but are no longer, and they give instances of that they did try to commit suicide. And then the people who were in charge found out about them, about what had tried to happen, and it worked out worse for them because they'd done that.
So they were punished.
They were punished for it. Yeah. Just 1 second.
Wow. No, it's fine, mate. John's struggling on through illness to bring his story to you guys.
Too much talking. I'm really sorry.
No, that's what you're on for, my man. Yeah, I'm trying to process everything you've told me there, John. To be fair, I mean, so it goes without saying that obviously you didn't end up taking your own life. What was the turning point? What stopped you, or what was the turning point where you decided to not reattempt?
So at the time, you have to remember, I was very religious. I won't go into too much detail, but the mind of the type of believer that I was is that reality is both the physical and the spiritual. Within the spiritual realm, you have God, and Jesus, and the angels, but you have Satan and the demons, and they play. They have a presence in the physical realm itself. So I'll leave it at that. So at the time, I felt that I had God's hand on my shoulder stopping me from ending my life. I did honestly feel that was the case, that I would be displeasing God, I would be making him sad, and I wouldn't want to do that.
So in a strange way, not only did your religion lead you to that place, but it then led you out of it as well, or your own belief system actually stopped you from taking it any further.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, now that I'm not religious, now that I'm atheist and agnostic in terms of a knowledge and belief in God or gods, is that I come to realize that there was no God with his, its hand on my shoulder. It was me at the end of the day. It was me doing that. I chose not to end my life. I chose to end my life,
Yeah.
but I chose not to. I had the power to make that change. And at the time it was very visceral, very emotional. And now with hindsight, I can look back on it being a bit more measured, obviously older, a bit more mature. Excuse me, sorry.
That's all right, mate. It's fine.
I'm really sorry. I just keep on
John,
getting
don't
a
apologise,
coughing
mate.
fit.
It's horrible, isn't it, when you get that tickle and you can't get
It's
rid?
just coming.
So it's okay,
Yeah.
mate. I can edit it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's. I'm personally, I'm not religious myself. Never have been. But then I wasn't raised around anybody that was either. And I used to, if I'm honest, I used to be quite anti-religion. I'd say I've got a completely neutral standpoint now, but I used to be very anti-religion. I would pick apart the theories and the interpretations, because those books and religious scriptures in any faith are open to interpretation.
Yeah.
I think my overall view on it now is, if being religious and believing in any kind of God keeps you living a good life and it brings you a sense of peace, then I'm all for that. Like I say, I'm not religious myself. It doesn't line up with any of my beliefs. But I think what obviously you were exposed to was the extreme end of the stick on the other side, where it became almost like religion was a prisoner to you. Sorry, a prisoner, a jailer. Not that you were the prisoner.
Yeah. And that's why the idea of a cult, or what many professionals call a high demand and high control group, is, this is what that group is, because it's still around today. and yeah, but I kind of transitioned through various different things, from being religious to doubting to where I am now.
How did that journey transpire, John? I mean, just to one question first of all: is your father, out of interest, is he still part of the group?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so how did your journey from being in the depths of that to doubting to working your way out? How did that transpire? How did that come
transpire? So, 2006, it was the year of my Claire wife being pregnant for the whole of that year. She was pregnant at the beginning of the year, but then 9 weeks into that pregnancy, we lost that child. But by the end of the same year, Claire had given birth to Joshua and Mia, who are now 17. Through that process, we had we had members of our church, our congregation, come to us, and out of the kindness of their hearts, they kind of said, don't worry, this isn't your fault. It's not God's fault. It's Satan. It's sin. Again, Christian-specific kind of phrases and ideology, and what that brings into a Christian's mind. I'm sure God will bless you and everything like that. And so when Claire got pregnant with Joshua and Mia, we had the same people coming to her, hasn't Jehovah blessed you, and everything like that. And for the very first time, I kind of stopped and I thought, well, hang on a second. Why am I praising God when everything goes right, but it's someone else's fault when everything goes wrong? And that was the first very doubt for me.
The first crack for you.
Yeah. And this is like 2006, so it's the early years of like YouTube. And there happened to be a series of videos by Robert Winston, who presented Child of Our Times. And it was a series of videos on conception and pregnancy. And through these series of videos, he went through the chemical and biological processes by which a sperm is created, an egg is created, and eventually an egg is fertilized. And then he went through the statistical probabilities by which you go from two, microscopic elements of two distinct people, that they come together, and 9 months after that, you get a healthy child. Or in my case, you get, well, not in my case, but in Claire's case, she gives birth to two healthy children.
Yeah.
It gave me a naturalistic explanation as to why pregnancy is successful, and in some cases it's not successful. The need for the supernatural, the need for the divine is secondary. It's no longer needed. I came across instances of the French scientist Laplace, who was constructing his model of the solar system, presenting it to Napoleon. And Napoleon said it's a fantastic work of artistry and mechanisms, but what about God? And Laplace retorted, this doesn't need God to function. There's a naturalistic explanation for it. And this was a second kind of thing for me, that for me, all of my life, the divine, the supernatural and the natural had been so closely interlinked that one couldn't exist without the other. And now all of a sudden I realize, well, actually, it could well be that there is a separation between the two, that the natural world doesn't need the spiritual world. And it could well be that the spiritual world doesn't actually exist at all, and there is just the natural world. And, over the course of like 10, 15 years of research and argumentation and logical thinking and learning of new ways to think about things, I came to an understanding of, there's probably more I don't know than I know, and the more humanity finds out about reality, the less we actually know. So I'm going to know even less than that.
So, in essence, you educated yourself out of your belief system that you were sort of like, pre-programmed with as a child. You then educated yourself out of that mindset. Would that be right?
Yeah, in a way. And this probably ties in really well to like mental health. I educated myself out of a mode of thinking, a mode of feeling, and I was quite ruthless in doing that. As I mentioned before, being raised in this type of group, I had particular opinions about myself. I was a sinner. I was corrupt. I was deserving of death simply for the mistake of being born and existing. I was raised with a particular notion about women, about gay men, the LGBTQ community, trans people, other species that we share the planet with, the planet itself. I had all of these kind of notions. And so I had this frame of reference, this way of thinking about the world. And through education and through soul searching, I deconstructed my old personality, my old way of thinking and feeling, and tried to the best of my ability to build what I would later come to understand is my authentic self.
That's really interesting, mate. I mean, I think you've had obviously quite a unique experience, obviously coming up but I'm sure there are still elements of what you're saying that people can resonate with. I mean,
Yeah.
I was listening to that and thinking, first of all, for all the downsides of social media, by the sounds of it, YouTube coming along was actually instrumental in
Yeah.
giving you the knowledge that you needed at that point in time. And
That and
also, I was
podcasts as well,
resonating.
funnily enough.
Oh, okay.
So
But
just
yeah, the
just
other thing that
quickly,
resonated. Yeah, go on.
so when round about a couple of years after my doubts set in, podcasts was starting to be a new thing, and I was working for a client, and they had an internet radio. Never seen anything like it before. I think it's like 2007, 2008, something like that. And they said, "Oh yeah, well, you've got all your DAB radio
The
stations, but
first
you've got these,
DAB.
yeah, you've got these podcasts as well." And I was like, What are podcasts?" And they said, "Well, it's like radio shows, but you can choose what you want to listen to." So, excuse me. So I'm a big sci-fi nerd, big Star Trek fan. And I went, right, I went through the categories, sci-fi, and found one which was called Treks in Sci-Fi, which is like audio of Star Trek episodes. Absolutely loved it. And then I just kept it running. And the podcast after that was a podcast called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And I'm eternally thankful for the host of that podcast, because that was about skeptical and critical thinking, the way in which we think. Is it based on cherry-picked evidence? Is it based on our own biases? Or is our reasoning based on evidence? And do we go where the evidence leads us, or do we cherry-pick the evidence for our preferred conclusion at the end? And learning this right at that initial stage of my early doubt helped me to progress in a way through the emotional transition of leaving God behind, that was evidence-based, that was sourced, that was reasoned and justified for me coming to whatever conclusions I come to now.
Yeah, and thank God that you did, that you did do that. I mean, as I was about to say, that it resonated with me in that when I found myself in a poor mental situation, that was exactly what I did. I focused a very different but a similar path.
Yeah,
I focused on educating myself out of it, looking into
yeah,
the science, the biology, the why this functions like that. And that was enough for me to put myself on the right track. And by the sounds of it, you've done a similar thing. I mean, the one question to ask, John, because it sounds like with you coming out of the situation you were in, you were married and had your first children prior to that. Was your wife also part of the same religious group?
yes, yeah, she was.
And so she came out of it with you at the same time. And
No, no,
okay,
it was a,
interesting.
it was, it was a very difficult transition, and between myself and my wife, we came close to the end of our relationship on numerous occasions because of the stress that I had caused as well. One of the things that I had done really badly was that my transition out of the religion wasn't completely emotionless. I got very angry about it. I got very angry about the lies that I'd been given, the missed opportunities, and I mistakenly took out that anger, not physically, but that frustration, that anger, it spilled out in lots of different ways over the course of 10 or so years of being angry with myself more than anything. And there are things that I truly, truly regret. Screaming at my kids, screaming at my wife, being emotionally unstable, mentally unstable, and the scars that I bear from that is my relationship with my children isn't. I mean, it's good, but it's not brilliant. Especially with my oldest daughter, I love all of my children, and I'm so proud of them. But there are things that there are things that I wish I could take back. There are things that I wish I could have done differently. But there are scars that we're meant to bear, and you can't just take that away, because it would be remiss of me to gaslight all my family and go, well, that didn't happen, or that didn't happen as bad as you thought it was. It's for me to recognize the consequences of my actions and to take ownership of them and fucking live with them as well, because it's not easy. It's not easy living with them. The scars that you bear, and even now, just trying to be calmer, not fly off the handle or anything like that. It's there because that trauma's there. Those scars don't go away. I have to keep it in check, and there's times where Claire's not been in a good man. She's a busy woman. She is a partner in the business. She runs a fantastic family. She's a principal foster carer. Her life is busy, and she has difficult days. And there's times where we just clash, and it's like, I've got to go, you've got to go. We just can't be around each other at the moment. And yeah, there's so much I regret. So much.
The thing is, John, I mean, we all do carry regrets. But by the sounds, listening to your story, you've sort of hit a period in your life where you've taken everything that you believed and everything that was installed in you at a fundamental stage as a child, and then you've had to rebuild yourself from scratch. So you've had to reformulate your opinions, your beliefs, and everything. And that kind of period of growth where everything that you once believed is now gone. It's not only is it must have been, I would imagine, a lonely place for you to be in a relationship where you had shifted before your wife.
Yeah.
It's a period then where you've got to, like you said, discover who you really are without all that framework that, it's like having a building and then taking the foundations away and going, okay, well, you're going to wobble now. Let's see if you fall over. It must have been an incredibly difficult time.
There's this gaping void that's there. And then you're like, well, what do I do now? Everything that was me just went. And then you're asking those fundamental questions about myself, about yourself. What is it to be a man? What is it to be a conscious agent in the world? How do I actually feel about these groups of people that all of my life I've maligned? One of my greatest regrets, one of the consequences of that is I came out of that mode of thinking, that mindset, in particular of the LGBTQ community, that they were sinners, they were degenerate, they were deserving of death. and that anyone who supported them were deserving of death. That's in the Bible. I can tell you where it is in Scripture.
Yeah.
But then my daughter, my oldest daughter, and my son are both gay. So through my sacrifice, they can now be true to themselves. So the scars that I bear are worth it because they won't have to be scarred with the same trauma.
Yeah.
But that's what it is to be a dad. That's what it is to be a father. You take this stuff on to protect your own children. And it's kind of a good and a bad thing as well, because you end up shouldering quietly all of this burden on your shoulders. You know, you're the strong, silent type. And in essence, she's screaming in agony because it's just too much on your shoulders. And yeah.
I listened, I can't remember where I heard this, but it made me think back when you said, you know, you had times where you would shout or scream at your wife or your kids. And I listened to a psychologist talking who basically said the thing is with men, we don't tend to, I know there are exceptions, but we don't tend to break down hysterically. So when you go out on a Friday night and you see a lad in the street shouting and wanting to fight everybody and all that kind of thing, that is a man's version of breaking down in tears. That is a man's cry for help. That's a man screaming internally. The child inside us is crying, is wanting the help, the attention that they need. And that's sometimes the outward display of those emotions from a man comes across as aggression and shouting and storming out and banging things. But inside, it's actually the same emotions that, you know, a woman might burst into tears for. And from what you've just said as well, mate, about your children, I think, although you said that you have your regrets and obviously you'd change things if you went back, I think they're still lucky that you came to the conclusions you did by the sounds of it and were strong enough to make the changes and walk away. Because I mean, I don't really want to. Because I wouldn't want to imagine what life for them might have been like had you have not made those changes.
Yeah, definitely. It would have been very similar to the many gay men and women who find themselves in similar situations, you know, right now, where for whatever reason they can't be true to themselves, and you know, it's hard to kind of, it's their choice, and whether it's right or wrong, I'm not in a position to say. But yeah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the journey that I've been on. I am the person who I am now. You know, all of these events are in my past, but I am the person who I am now. You know, Thursday night, because of all of these things that have happened. If any of these things had been different, I would be a different person now. If my parents hadn't have separated, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't have my family. I wouldn't have my beautiful wife. You know, my existence would be completely different.
That's it. I think if you can adapt that mindset where you can find value in your trauma, that's where the whole mindset shifts, and it's such a powerful thing. It's such a powerful mindset shift to look back at the shit that's happened to you in life, and try and find the value from it, the lesson from it.
Well, I know I've
used
used
it as a growth.
Yeah, I've used the analogy in the past that the fire that's within us is that we can use it for one of two things. We can use that fire as a fuel, and we can use that fuel to consume us, or we can use it to propel us to greater things. And I think with all of us, men, women, and within the spectrum of gender and everything like that, is that we have the opportunities to wallow in our own self-doubt and pity, or we can propel ourselves to something greater.
That's it, isn't it? I think that you can let your trauma become your identity if you're not careful.
Yeah.
You can
So
you can
easy.
become
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah, and
easy
you can
to do.
become the victim of whatever happened to you, and that can become a strong part of your identity. And I know the word
It's
victim is laced, but
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, and I come from this with being part of a religious community and then being part of the ex-religious community. But now I'm past that now. Is that within the ex-religious community is that people were perpetually a victim, and that for many people they were just trapped in amber of victimhood, which was legitimate. They had trauma, but they either didn't want to or didn't have the means to break out of that amber prison of their own mental and emotional state to go beyond that. And now I find myself beyond that to the person who I am. I'm not a member of that religious community. I'm not an ex-member of that religious community. I'm just me now.
yeah. So you've grown and you've moved past that. It's always going
Yeah.
to be a part of who you are because it's part of your growth story. But I like see that's what I like to think, and me personally, I like to think that I'm on a steady upward trajectory of
Mm.
growth, always growing, always learning. So the person I am this time next year won't be the person that's sat talking to you now. But a lot of people do, like you talked about the amber. I like to say people crystallize, so they
Mm.
get stuck at a level and
Yeah.
that they stop growing and they become what they are in that very moment.
Mm.
And I think that's a very dangerous and painful place to be, personally. But to pull it back to your story, John, so was it a gradual? Did you gradually leave the group, or was it like an explosive one day, I'm out?
It was gradual. It took about 10 years of
Took that long
me
to
be
leave?
yeah, yeah. So from the age of 25 to 34, 35 is when I eventually left. And through that period of time, there's a term within the group, especially the X community, is that you're physically in, so you're attending church services and things like that, but you're mentally out. So you no longer believe the unique teachings of the group. You might still have a belief in God, or the salvation of Jesus Christ, or the tenets of the Bible, but you no longer believe, our group's special compared to everyone else. So it took me a good 10 years to transition through to the point of
Yeah.
mid 30s, to completely leave. My wife was still part of the group. She found it very difficult because my children stopped attending as well over a course of time. And then eventually, my wife left for different reasons. She still has a very firm belief in a higher power, a creative force within the universe. Um,
Mm.
but I think if God were of any gender, God would be a woman, personally, because women
Probably is.
women create life, and I could
Yeah.
appreciate a creative force having a feminine aspect to itself.
Well, I think to be fair, mate, it's worth saying at this point, you and your wife have done incredibly well to have, as rocky as it might have been, stuck together through that. because you've both
Yeah.
gone through a huge change, and all too often when it comes to relationships, people do change and they grow apart, and that's the end. So the fact that you guys have stuck with it, stuck together through your changes, is really commendable, mate. So that's a big credit to you guys.
I think it's partially down to my 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 wife is a fantastic person anyway. She's gone through her own issues and trauma. I think one of the things that has helped us is open communication and honest communication. We don't get it all right. Sometimes I don't know if you've had a situation where the words that are coming out of your mouth are not necessarily the words that are being heard by your partner. We're both living, breathing creatures. We have our good days and our bad days, but open communication has really helped. But I think what has particularly helped us is over the past kind of 5-6 years that we've been fostering, we have, through education, again, it seems to be that we've learned more about trauma, especially for children, how that might present itself in different ways throughout a child's growth and experience, and how childhood trauma can affect you in later life as an adult. And I think learning about that, educating ourselves, with the aid of helping the children who we care for, has made us have the vocabulary and to understand the principles by which we can now describe our own trauma in a way that is better descriptive, better understood, and then you're better able to work on that and work through the problems and issues that you're going to have. It's hard being in a monogamous relationship. Myself and Claire, we've been married for 20 years. I love her to bits and I fancy the pants off her now. But she's probably she jokingly said one time, she said, "Jonathan, one of these days, I'd love to open your internet browser history and just find one porn site instead of just brush reviews and stuff like that. Stop talking
John,
to me
that is
about
porn
painting.
to us, though, isn't it?
Yeah, stop talking to me about paint. I'm just not interested." So it's having a laugh and a joke and having a good sense of humour. Even after all this time and all of the different things that we've gone through, we still have a laugh and a joke, even at the worst of times. And that's it.
It sounds like you've got it right, mate. It really does, and I love
Can I
the
just
fact that.
fill up my glass quickly?
Yeah, of course, mate. Yeah,
I'll just be 2 seconds. You can edit this bit out.
No, it's fine. Not a problem, mate. Not a problem. Yeah, what I was saying, John, is what I love about that is that you said that as part of the fostering thing, you're learning about childhood trauma and that kind of thing. And one thing I've felt is through my journey in education, like learning about psychology and doing the degree that I'm doing, is there's so many times where I've identified things in myself that I didn't even know were there through learning. So you learn about certain ways of thinking and behaviours, and then it's like, oh, shit, half of that applies to me. There's a lot of stuff that I believe through educating yourself, you can learn a lot more about yourself just by learning about general trauma, psychology, that kind of thing. I think it's so valuable because you end up almost doing self-therapy. That's how it's been for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, and just going back to linking that to with being self-employed, is that understanding that it makes you better prepared for situations where a client may be unjustified in their anger or frustration to you, I think educating yourself in that way, because they are quite meaty and quite heady topics to be dealing with. But I do think it
Yeah.
makes you a better tradesperson as well. Makes you better
Mm.
at openly communicating with your clients, and it mitigates any potential problems or issues that might crop up in the course of working for particular clients who themselves may have good or bad days as well.
I mean, one thing I want to ask you, John, before we move on, it is quite a niche subject that you've been talking about, but there's a
Yeah,
chance that somebody out there at some stage might be listening
yeah.
to this who could be in a similar situation. Um, is there anything you would say to anybody who was in that position that you were in terms of if somebody's out there having doubts about their sort of like programming, as it were?
Mm.
What advice would you give to somebody that might have been in a similar situation?
I think my advice would be is to take a minute and go easy on yourself and know that your doubts are justified, they're reasonable, and it's natural to have doubts as well. The interesting thing is that my situation, though it's not unique, but it might present as being unique to the listeners and the watchers of this, is that a lot of the tenants are mimicked in from high control groups to toxic relationships as well, being gaslighted, lied to, being manipulated, having your time, resources, finances dictated to what you can and can't do with them. And so, especially for people who find themselves in a situation where they might be in a relationship or some form of control or demanding situation, those things are pretty relevant, and to be open to change, to not deny your doubts, and that there are resources out there that can help and support you with whatever your unique situation is. And the internet, for all of its problems and issues, especially if you're coming from a situation where you are in a high demand or high control group, that there are support groups out there where you can be anonymous, you can maintain anonymity, and you can openly communicate about whatever problems or issues you're facing with people who have gone through something similar, or like you and I, we're trying to educate ourselves and offer our perspective from an educational basis to help support individuals who might be going through something similar.
Yeah, I think what you've said there is bang on as well. Although your situation was very unique, it does have a lot of crossovers with, like you say, with the control, and that can easily cross over into any kind of toxic relationship, whether that's romantic or a family relationship.
Mm.
So yeah, it's a very valid point, mate. So you've come obviously this far to the point where you have made now. What we got there, John? Who's on the lap?
This is Tilly. Can you see
Tilly.
Tilly?
Go on, hold him up for the
Tilly,
camera.
come on, Tilly, say hi.
Oh, bless her.
She's a bobtailed cat. She has no tail.
Oh, okay. As
Yeah.
in by breed or by accident?
By breed, her mother and her brother didn't have a tail. So I
Oh,
have a
no way.
tailless cat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair play, mate. Where was I? So coming out of the situation that you were in, to a point of being fully out of the group now, how was that for you?
It was liberating, but it was scary as well.
Mm.
The group, as part of its control mechanism, it made out that anyone who left the safe confines of the group was again susceptible to worldly influences like drinking and smoking and using foul language. And of course, for a lot of people who come from a very sheltered existence, they go into the real world with no experience, with the 11 on the naivety scale, because the world, with all of its wonders and majesty, can be a pretty horrific place as well if you're not careful. And people who are naive can be easily preyed upon by people who gain pleasure from being a predator for people who are naive. So, yeah, I find myself in a position now where there's wonder to the world, because I had everything answered for me previously, and now I haven't got all the answers, and I'm enjoying trying to find them.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic place to be. To be fair, I'm glad to hear the positivity in that. I mean, it's one hell of a journey. I would imagine. Again, I was listening to it, whether it was a podcast or an interview somewhere, and the theme of it was that during that sort of the coming out of the chrysalis, the butterfly moment, as it were, when you first come out of and you hatch into who is the new you, you're very alone. You haven't got your tribe around you because you're still finding who you are. And there can be that sort of period of isolation where the friends that you had no longer match your values, but you haven't found the new friends that hold the same values. With it being such a massive life change that you went through, how did you find that element of it, or are you still sort of navigating that?
Still navigating that, yeah, very much so. It's the same thing of like, do you want to be my friend? Someone, please be my friend. Yeah, very much. We're still in that position now of. I think you worded it really well. You know, old friends don't marry up with the principles and values that you have now, but you haven't found people who, you know, have the same principles as you. So we're very much in that emerged from the chrysalis kind of moment. And, you know, it's hard with having a family, especially having a younger child as well. But it just means that we're closer as a family. And I jokingly say that one of the things that I love about parenting again is I made all my mistakes first time round, so I'm bound to get it right this time. And I'm just enjoying the process of being a silly daddy again. You know, I can be silly. I can, you know, my little girl will say, "Daddy, what have you done today?" In reality, I've been sanding walls down. But I can say, well, I rode a dragon to the moon, and I brought some moon back with me, and I've left it in the van. But now I'm here to see you. I can make up any story. It's the wonderful thing of, especially just having Christmas. This is like the first proper Christmas where I've enjoyed the magic of it, because I've seen Christmas properly through the eyes of a child. And I realised that, you know, for all of my life, I've missed that. But I'm enjoying it vicariously through her. And it's such a wonder to behold.
I must admit, when I mean, I'll be honest with you, John, my initial response to can I imagine having a young child again now is like horror. It's like, oh my God. But mainly because of the sleepless nights and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when I think back, I had my son when I was 22. And although at the time I felt ready, I felt like I was a man, I felt like I was an adult, looking back now, at 39, I think. I mean, I don't know. I mean, only my son could answer the question. I've done. I think I've always done the best I could with the tools I had, but I know for
Yeah.
a fact that I now have a lot more tools. So I kind of think it would be cool to rerun that. And not that I'm going to have any more kids, because I'm disconnected. I've had a vasectomy.
Same
The
here.
game's over for me.
Yeah, game's
So,
over.
but I do think that it would. I honestly believe that I would make a much better father now, because I've got all that extra experience, the tools, the knowledge that I didn't have then. That I was still immature.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you've got that,
Totally, yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think, I was 23 when Jasmine was born. I was 25 when Joshua and Mia were born. I was a child myself, having
Yeah.
children. And I came with that with a child's mindset as well. I know, like, messaging each other previous to this, I mentioned about when it came to mental health within the group, it was you pray it away. That's what you do. You don't seek advice. You don't go and seek medication. The advice from the group has changed a bit, ever so slightly, but it's still you praying it away. And I was still part of the group back then when my children were born. So I'm a child, in my early 20s, having children, being a father, again, having, the mental and emotional anguish, anxiety of being a new parent, and not having the vocabulary to describe how I'm feeling, praying fervently. I mean, my wife can attest to me being on my hands and knees, crying, praying, because I wanted to be a good father. Whether that works for you, that's great. It didn't work for me because there is no, I don't believe, and I have no knowledge that any God, any higher power, is interested in anything like that. So I was I thought I was doing the right thing with my mental health, but objectively I wasn't. And I think it's a good way of showcasing how mental health is unique. It's unique to every individual. What works for some doesn't work for others, and what works for you now might not work for you tomorrow. And it's being open to that,
Yeah.
and being willing to change, being willing to be aware of your own mental health and well-being, and like change with that.
I think it's important to say as well, and after listening to some of the things that you've said, that you you should be kind to yourself, in that a lot of the time you might look back at things now and think you should have done things differently, but at the time you were doing the best you could with the tools that you had at that stage in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, it's like, let's bring it back to decorating here, but it's like looking back on the jobs that you used to hand sand and realizing that, yeah, you'd do a lot better with a Festool or a Merca. But at that time you didn't have them. It didn't exist. And it's the
Yeah.
same with your mental state. When you were younger and in the position you were in, you were still trying to do the best with the tools that you had at that stage. Those tools are far inferior to what you've got now. But, be kind to yourself, John, looking back. Because, quite a lot you mentioned regret. I think in context, you can only, as I say, you can only have operated with what you had at that time.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's it's an evolution, isn't it?
And like, I'm 42 now. I'm 43. In May will be my birthday, and I think I find myself in a position now where I get depressive moments. I suffer from anxiety a lot, but I know what I
Mm.
know what that is. I know why I'm feeling that way, and I put in places I have the processes to know that, be open to it, and it, have the suite of ways in which I can calm my body, calm my mind, calm my emotions. So the person who I am now is very different to the
Mm.
person who I was like at 35 when I left the group, and the person who I will be in 10 years' time will be
Yeah.
different to the person that I am now. And
Yeah,
I
much
think
so.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
being aware of that is, as long as I am alive and a conscious creature, it's that evolutionary process of mental and emotional growth that I'm going through, and hopefully I can impart the successes and failures in a way that encourages my own personal growth and flourishing, but also for that for my children as well, which means that I need to be a communicative father, an open father, not a distant one. Um, Talk about my mental and emotional health, my well-being, my good days, my bad days, so that my kids know, it's all right to talk about stuff. My dad does, my mum does. It's that generational thing that
Yeah.
we've been so caught in, this generational thing of men. We don't talk about it. We keep it to ourselves. Hopefully, in my own way, I'm trying to break that cycle.
100%, mate. I mean, you know, the key thing that's been a recurrent theme through this conversation as well is that you're very reflective. So
Mm,
you're reflecting on yourself all the time,
yeah.
and even to the point where you're saying, you're going to be somewhere else in 10 years' time. So having that mindset in itself is what I think what everyone needs. And if everybody
Mm,
were to reflect upon themselves, because I think a key thing to mention is that the emotions never change. Like you still get, like with me, I still get anxious, I still get angry, I still get aggressive. That what has changed is my tool set. So I've now got the tools to cope. I've got the coping mechanisms. I notice the warning signs a lot earlier, and I know how to nullify those emotions and feelings as they come up. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, I didn't. So I was more reactive, I was more aggressive. Now I know my triggers a lot more. So I know how to work with that. And again, you have to be kind on your younger self, the previous version of you, to know that there was still a lot of creases to be ironed out. There's still a lot of creases to iron out. Um, you can't look back on that previous version of yourself too critically, because at that time, that was all you had to work with. Mm, I've lost you, John. Lost him. Unfortunately, we appear to have lost John, so I'm going to try and get him back and edit it in. But if I can't, it might be the end of the conversation. So if that is the case and John can't rejoin the studio, at this point, I would like to say you can find John at JGDecorator on Instagram. Would be a shame to end the episode this way. However, it has been an incredibly insightful conversation. So I'd like to thank John for his time, his openness, and if anything you've heard today has affected you, then please do reach out. There are plenty of organisations out there. John is coming back. And John is back. Yeah, what happened there, mate?
I just disconnected all of a sudden.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was just having a little chat to myself then that I'll probably try and edit out. Um, so, yeah, where did we get to?
um, I think you were talking about being kind to yourself.
Yeah. Essentially, that's it, isn't it? On that process of evolution, the previous version of yourself, you can't really criticize because you always look backwards, don't you, as the new version of you, and look at the inferior version of you, and then you can kind of think, it could have been better. Well, you could have, but you didn't know the mechanisms and the tools that you now do. So
Yeah,
it's a paradox that can't be solved. And I would imagine the 60-year-old you, the 70-year-old you, will look back with knowledge that this current version of you doesn't currently
yeah,
possess. So,
yeah,
and that's part of the beauty of life, that, isn't it, John? So if we were all stood
yeah,
still, it'd be pretty damn boring.
yeah, definitely. I think um, I think I appreciate that more because again, I was raised with the notion that I had eternity as my
Mm,
reward. So, I don't have to worry about now because eternity is my reward. And I can work on myself better in paradise where I'll live forever. Whereas I don't believe that now. I have no reason to
mm,
believe that, should I say. So the only reality that I'm conscious of is this one here. The only life that I have is this one here. If there is something afterwards, then that's a bonus. But it shouldn't detract from the reality now, the life that I live, the reality that I share with other people, my family, with friends that I meet, online, like yourself and others, of just having an enjoyment of life. I know that sounds a bit sentimental, but I truly, truly feel that way of an enjoyment of life. And I recognize that even when I get really bad days, where I am really bad, there's a kind of a weird perverseness in even my mental health ups and downs because I could very easily not have any of that if I'd have killed myself when I was 16. Purely the fact that I'm still
yeah.
here and I have good days and bad days means that I'm alive now.
Mm, yeah. And that's a powerful statement, isn't it?
Yeah, it comes from a quote from Richard Dawkins. It's about how privileged we are to be alive. That all of the potential people who could have been born is more numerous than the people who have ever lived. And within that potential of people who have never been born, there are poets greater than Keats, there are scientists greater than Newton or Einstein, there are speakers better than Gandhi or Martin Luther King. But they'll never know any of that because they were never born. So us, who have the opportunity to be alive, shouldn't we be thankful that we have the privilege of, for a fleeting amount of time, as Carl Sagan says, we are the universe's way of knowing itself. That is what life is all about.
Wow. Mate, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful sentiment. And I think that's also probably an incredible way to wrap up this conversation.
My pleasure.
Um, I think, we could probably go on,
Yeah.
longer. But what I want to say, John, is I'm incredibly thankful for your time. Incredibly thankful that you've come on. you've told your story and opened up like you have about some incredibly personal details, and hopefully people listening to this now will have that that personal touch, that insight into who John Graham is, rather than just the face of the business.
Yeah.
The fact that you're a man that's gone through all these things, that you're continuing to grow and learn. You've got some very deep and powerful thoughts in there. And I hope people will appreciate your story for what it is, which is, to me, what I've taken from it is, it's a story of adversity and growth, and a continued story of growth. And it sounds like, you're talking halfway through writing the book. So there's still a lot to come.
Yeah.
But I do, I can't thank you enough, mate, for coming on, being open, and being part of this movement, for want of a better word, of men that are going to open up and talk about their struggles, their past, their history, their future, with the hope of inspiring others to do the same. That said, is there anything else you want to say, John? That's fantastic, mate. I'll put a link to your bio in the episode details below in the description, so there'll be a live link there to your Instagram. If anybody has listened to this and has enjoyed it, please give us a like, a follow, share, subscribe, depending on what platform you're on. And thank you very much for listening. John, again, it's been a pleasure, mate. I'm sure we'll talk again.